Welcome to the Outlaw Radio Show. Last week, we ran into all kinds of technical difficulties. We apologize for that. One of the things that we did do is we have a lot of redundancies in the way that we record the show. Not only do we stream it and then it archives, but we record on the cameras themselves. And so this week, Creighton actually took the footage, mixed it all down. And so we have posted on our YouTube channel, as well as our Facebook page, kind of a post edit of last week's episode without any of the glitches. It got uploaded today and posted. And so if you weren't with us last week, we talked about this COVID-19 vaccination and some really interesting thoughts. And but again, we kind of got derailed with some technology as far as the live stream goes, but we were able to edit the video and post it. So hope you guys enjoy. In addition to that, the audio goes out on the radio as well as the podcast. Speaking of which, this is the live stream recording of an actual radio program. The radio show is Outlaw Radio. We record 4 blocks of audio over the next hour. These 4 blocks of audio, these audio files, get sent to his productions, Josh Brown, his wonderful team there in Indiana. They take those audio files, format them, produce them for syndication. They get sent out to all of our wonderful radio partners, aired across America, which is really kind of a humbling thing. And then at that point, we take those audio files back, those 4 files, and we put them together as a podcast. So we release a podcast. So what you're watching tonight is the live streaming of the recording of a radio show. I am joined by Creighton Vaughn, who is kind of the man behind the gear, as well as Nick Monty and Deal Daddy Derek, who are kind of the audience members. Fellas, welcome to the Outlaw Radio Show.
Hello, everyone.
Always a pleasure to be here.
glad you guys are here. Derek, we really didn't get the opportunity to promote this last week because we were too distracted. And you're the only one that came sporting, but we've recently developed some Outlaw Radio t-shirts. So kind of show the audience the
hold on, move your
there you go. The Outlaw Radio t-shirts, which are not for sale and are only for giveaways. In fact, one of our diehard consistent viewers, Mr. Neil, came over to check on the van yesterday, and I gave him a t-shirt. He was like, "How much do I owe you for it?" And I was like, "Nothing, because you're a listener." And we appreciate people listening. We're going to give a t-shirt to just people who listen. So if you would like a t-shirt and you are a consistent listener, like I'm thinking right off the bat.
Consistent watcher.
Okay. We'll add that caveat. You're a consistent watcher. I'm thinking, obviously, Pastor Bob V will just send us your mailing address, t-shirt size. We will send you an Outlaw Radio t-shirt for free. We also plan to send one to his productions and some of those guys. I've got kind of a list that we're sending shirts out to. We don't have a lot of them, but the Outlaw Radio t-shirt. How was your guys' week? We're just kind of here at the beginning, just easing into the program, letting people kind of log on to the stream. 8:00 Wednesday nights, we do this, but sometimes it takes a few minutes for people to find our YouTube channel, which is outlawradio.live, or facebook.com/the Radio Outlaw. Those are the two platforms we stream. Craig kind of explained to everyone the benefits, the interactive, the connectivity of the live stream. And then Nick and Derek, I want you guys to kind of share a little bit about how you guys are doing your week and whatnot, and then we'll dive right into the show.
So one of the benefits of watching instead of just listening is that you get to see my pretty face, which is a wonderful sight for anybody that gets to view it. Also, you get,
as long as the ISO is high enough. And then funny. You blend into the background.
Yeah, we really need to get me like a nice light wood paneling behind me. You put the dark guy in front of the black sheet, but whatever. Anyway,
nice Star Wars t-shirt, by the way.
Thank you.
I gave that to you. That was a Father's Day gift my kids gave me.
Well, I don't have kids, so now it's mine. Now it's my Father's Day shirt. It's why not a Father's Day shirt.
They gave me these Star Wars t-shirts, and I wore them once, and when I washed them, they shrunk to an uncomfortable fitting. And so I was like, man, I'm gonna gift these to Creighton. I hope my kids don't recognize them.
Man, you growing out of clothes is one of the best things that's ever happened to me.
At some point, I'm gonna grow back down to we'll switch.
Not gonna happen.
All right. So explain. I kind of derailed.
I'm also wearing your boots.
Nice boots.
Thank you.
In my pants.
No, these are black.
Oh, okay.
Anyway,
Nick just desperately wanted to jump into that, didn't he?
I do own 2 pairs of Nick's pants.
Of Nick's pants.
Yes.
All right.
So you get to have fun with us doing this, as if we were just hanging out. And then between blocks, we also talk about the actual quality of the show, what we're talking about. We get some input from Nick and Derek, which is often very insightful, very interesting. We had like a 10-minute conversation at the end of last episode.
Derek got himself on the radio last week.
That's right. It was a good time.
Too.
I know. I only think Nick's gotten himself on the radio once. He's got to kind of up his game, I'm thinking.
I'll try.
All right, there we go.
Put on your smart pants.
So again, it's the actual radio show features me, and then Creighton is kind of my sidekick for that. The live stream is an extended conversation between the blocks of the radio show, where Derek and Nick, who are listening, kind of try to reflect you, the listening audience. So they're processing what we're discussing the same way that you would be. And then hopefully, in turn, they're providing some insight, some questions, some feedback that maybe would completely resonate with the things that you're thinking of as you're listening. And so, guys, have your ears tuned in. And again, there's really nothing off limits here on the Outlaw Radio Show, especially with today's topic, which will be relevant, but also fairly controversial. I will say, Creighton, and you'll find this interesting. You do need to go and because of the glitch with the live stream last week, and then the time it took to do the edit, the podcast actually was released before the video.
Oh, gotcha.
And so I was putting the 4 blocks of audio back together. And so I was listening. So if you listen to the podcast, if you listen to the radio show, there is another predominant voice. And that is Josh Brown, our producer, who kind of does the lead-ins. He sets the stage. Like, he's the other prominent voice on Outlaw Radio. We're actually in the works of him flying down and hanging out with us one Wednesday night.
Oh, that'll be
which
sweet.
would be a blast. But I was listening to basically the second half of the show because that's where I do the edit. And so I listened to Josh's lengthy intro into what, because we were talking about vaccines, the vaccine. And his intro was like basically a full-blown disclaimer. Like it was something to the effect of like,
We are not medical.
I do need to make sure that anyone listening to this knows, for legal and fiduciary purposes, that no one on this show is a medical professional, nor are they voicing, official medical diagnosis. You should not be able to hold anyone on the show, Zach, Creighton, or the other guys, or his productions liable for like it was this lengthy cover your butt type of lead in, and I haven't reached out to him about it, but I thought that's why Josh gets paid the big bucks. You know what I mean?
I mean, it was a smart move. I was out on limbs on some of that stuff.
I'm
once again, college dropout.
I'm gonna say that he was doing it for us. I think he was doing it because his name is also associated with,
For sure.
with this
Absolutely.
train wreck, right?
For sure.
All right. Well, with all that in mind, let's go ahead and dive in. You guys ready?
Yeah.
Yep.
So here we go. We don't need, because we're not using the AC. We're good with all that. Let's do this. I'm going to hit some music, rock some music. Let's do this. First block of audio is 14 minutes. 14 minutes. Creighton, you will be on.
Cool.
You will be on. And really, fellas, you guys might be on too. So let's do this. 3, 2, 1. Welcome to the Outlaw Radio Show. My name is Zach Adams, and I pastor a church located just outside of Athens, Georgia. The name of the church is Calvary 316. If you happen to be local and listening, let me invite you to come be my guest one Sunday morning soon. Our service begins promptly at 10:30 a.m. If, let's say, you're listening and maybe you aren't local to our area, but you're in need of a good Bible teaching church that you can connect with maybe online, you can always attend our service digitally. Again, the easiest way to find us is our YouTube channel, which is Calvary316.live. Again, Calvary316.live. Be a subscriber, and we live stream our services. And so you can join us in person if you're local. If not, join us digitally. We'd love for you to be our guest. If you'd like to learn more about the church, you can visit Calvary316.tv. That's our website. If you'd like to access the teaching media, so we are Calvary Chapel Church, which means we faithfully teach God's word, verse by verse, chapter by chapter. As Pastor Chuck Smith, kind of the founder of the Calvary Chapel movement, he kind of coined the phrase that we simply teach God's word simply, and we really seek to model that. So right now we are in the very end of a series through the book of Revelation. We're about to start a series, a verse by verse series through Song of Solomon, which will cover most of the summer, and then we'll be transitioning into the Gospel of Matthew. If you are a fan of Outlaw Radio, well, let me say that to access our media, go to c316.tv. So Calvary316.tv is the church website. Our media archive is c316.tv. Again, the YouTube channel, Calvary316.live. As I was saying, if you are a fan of the Outlaw Radio Show, the show itself kind of follows under the umbrella of a few different mediums. So we, early on in the show's formation, we actually got to start offering a 2-minute devotional. So Outlaw Radio, we recorded about 50 2-minute devos, all dealing with grace. That's kind of where we got the name Outlaw Radio, Life Outside of the Law. I had done a series going through the book of Galatians, Paul's manifesto of Christian liberty, life and grace and not the law. And so that's where we got Outlaw As a matter of fact, the title of my series was Outlaw Church, and then we had the opportunity to do a radio show, so we called it Outlaw Radio. So everything began early on with these 2-minute devotionals, which you can get on our podcast. So again, we are a radio show, but everything that we do on radio is podcasted. Again, Apple Podcasting, Google Play, Spotify. You can find our podcast. And if you really go all the way back to the beginning, you'll find initially 50 of these 2-minute devotionals. So again, formatted for radio, they're 2 minutes, intro, outro, very cool, slick programming, all grace-centric. So that's how we kind of began. It didn't take too long before we started getting requests from stations to offer our Sunday morning Bible study. So what happens at the pulpit at Calvary 316, to offer it in a radio format as well. And so basically a half-hour radio program, which is most Bible teaching, roughly hits around 24 minutes when you add station IDs, intros, outros, etc. And so we partnered again with this new endeavor, His Productions, Josh Brown, and they took our Bible study audio, the stuff we were doing at Calvary 316, and they produced it for radio. So they would take basically a 50-minute Bible study, and the way that they were able to splice it and edit it, were able to present it as kind of 2 different Bible studies. They're very brilliant in the way that they handle their editing, just spot on as far as their technical savvy and just the ministry goes. They're at His Productions. And so we started releasing our Bible study content in a radio format. In fact, today, if you do subscribe to the podcast, you'll notice that 2 things get really released weekly. Yes, this radio show, which is, we say it's an hour-long radio show. It's really 52 minutes. Again, the way that radio works, 52-minute is an hour. So we offer this kind of more laid-back talk format, not always Bible teaching, but conversation about things that are going on socially within our community, trying to present it in an honest, real way, presenting it in a biblical way. But you'll also notice that released as well so we have the Outlaw Radio show, but they're basically broadcast Outlaw Radio, and they're specific to books of the Bible. And so we send an entire series to His Productions, and then they produce it, format it for radio, and then we podcast it. And so as you scroll through the podcast, you will see every other episode isn't the show, but it's the broadcast, and that's actual literal Bible teaching. That's what happens on Sunday morning. And His Productions produces it for radio, and then we release it as podcast. I mention that because we've done the whole book of Galatians has been released. Then we released the whole book of Genesis. We did Genesis, which was like 100 and something episodes. And then we did the book of, I believe we did the book of Jonah. And then we released Philippians, which we're currently at the very end of. And then everything's set up, I believe, starting in May, getting into May, you should be getting a series that I did through the book of Leviticus. So I did, yes, a verse-by-verse study, a series verse-by-verse again through the book of Leviticus, and kind of angled it as the precedent for grace. Again, going all the way back to the beginning and God's plan, His model for all of this, which we're going to get into a little bit. And so I only bring this up because if you do subscribe to the podcast, in addition to my commentary on things going on in the world, we have just as much pure Bible teaching content, because that's really the heart and the ministry of our church. Again, I am a pastor, and I always try to make sure that I qualify what happens on the radio show as not my pastoral ministry. I would never talk politics from the pulpit. I have too much of a reverence for the pulpit. The pulpit is a place where God's word should go forth, for it's living and powerful, sharper than a two-edged sword, and able to transform lives. It's the mechanism by which Jesus takes broken people, makes them whole, by which lost people are found, by which broken people are made more into the image and likeness of Jesus. And so at church, I never talk politics. I say never. There are times I might bring up something relevant, particularly to a text that we're going through in way of application. But what we do at Calvary 316, the church, is nothing like the radio show. The radio show is specifically a mechanism by which I talk about other things. If you're wanting Bible teaching, this is not the program. We have a whole other medium that's designed for that. This has a very specific aim, purpose, and function. Also, branding. I mean, this is what the Lord has called us to do with the show, not to be a Bible teaching program, but to be more of a Bible-focused commentary on the things that are going on in the world. With that in mind, wherever you're listening or however you're listening, I do hope that you do stay with me over the next hour as I seek to deconstruct the negative perception that the world has of Christians. And yes, the world has negative perceptions of Christians, and we hope to do that by talking about things that are relevant in an honest, genuine, and biblical way. Before I get any further into the subject matter of today, which will be very controversial, I do want to welcome my partner in crime, kind of the man behind the technology, behind the show, behind the live stream, Creighton Vaughn. Creighton, welcome to the Outlaw Radio Show.
Hello. And to any new listeners, when Zach says something's controversial, it means buckle up. Things are going to get weird.
So as I do every Wednesday, I send you kind of a 2 or 3 sentence tag that we use for our live stream, which I should say that if you're listening on radio or podcasting, we live stream the recording. So if you're listening to the show, this is not being presented live. That being said, we live stream what you're listening to. And Creighton, why don't you let the audience know kind of when that happens and kind of the benefits of that?
It happens on Wednesday nights at 8 p.m. The benefits are actually seeing us and putting faces to voices, as well as the conversations we have between blocks, which we often expand upon what we were talking about in the previous block with both you and me and a couple of our friends, Nick and Derek, who you might sometimes hear on the radio, but not often.
Sometimes you hear them on the radio on accident because they something is said and they just kind of jump in. Other times it's intentional, like the last week's episode on vaccines. Derek, just between blocks, we just had some really cool conversation. And so when the points are poignant and relevant, we include them as well. And so the other component to this is that, again, if you're listening, if you watch it being live, enables us to interact with the listening audience, the viewer, so to speak. And so what two mediums do we stream to, and how do they interact with us?
YouTube and Facebook. On YouTube, we are Outlaw Radio. You can find us at outlawradio.live.
That's the easiest
way to get to our YouTube channel.
Our Facebook page, facebook.com/the Radio Outlaw. So I'll just throw that
right.
out. So we stream on both of those platforms.
Exactly. And I have my computer in front of me. I'm switching tabs between the Facebook feed and the YouTube stream. So you can post comments to either one. I will see it. And if I think it is good, pertinent, and as Josh Brown might say, pithy, I will add it in and we'll talk about that as well, usually between blocks.
That's cool. So today's topic. So again, I send you like a 2 or 3 sentence tag that we use kind of to promote the live stream. What was, again, with the audience not knowing what we're going to discuss today, what was your immediate reaction when you saw the subject matter?
My immediate reaction was something along the lines of, oh boy, we're going to get in trouble.
which is really what we're good at and doing our best to accomplish. So, diving into it.
Right,
I want to talk
all the time we have left in this block.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So we were going to talk today with the time that we have left about 2 issues that are very relevant. We're going to talk about policing, and more specifically, I think the lion's share is I want to talk about prisons, the prison system. And I really want to come at this from a very biblical standpoint. Like what is God's blueprint for this type of a thing? And really, it's difficult to extrapolate that out, especially in the context of the church. When we look at the millennial kingdom of Jesus, his 1,000-year reign on this earth, there's no mention of any of these type of things of of what the legal system will look like. It doesn't really matter when the judge is righteous. When Jesus is the judge, the jury, you don't have to worry about inequity,
Right.
or inequalities. So when it comes to the millennial reign of Christ and any of the prophetic passages that deal with that, or when you get to the latter chapters of the book of Revelation, there's no mention of how is justice administrated during a reign of Jesus on the earth, where you still have fallen sinners, which is, I think, a very interesting idea. So we're kind of left to speculate there. Again, we can understand that for eternity, once heaven and earth have passed away and all things become new, this will be a moot point.
Right, because that'll be after the final judgment.
And in fact, we're told in the end of Revelation, the curse will be no more. So, we won't have to deal with any of these type of issues. The interesting thing, again, when you look at the New Testament authors, they're not writing about government, society. They just say submit. So when we really are wanting to try to, what are God's thoughts on these type of things, you have to go to the law. You have to go to where, God was formatting his people, being the nation of Israel. And so, again, full circle, you have to go back to the book of Leviticus. So don't go anywhere. We're going to continue this thought on the Outlaw Radio Show. Got anything online? Or as you're looking, you guys have anything, fellas?
Mm-mm. Not yet.
Not yet. We haven't really
got into the meat yet.
Pastor Bob is here. Hi, Pastor Bob.
Hi, Pastor Bob.
He literally just said Pastor Bob is here.
Absolutely. That's what we love. Pastor Bob, send me a direct message on Facebook with your shirt size and mailing address, and we're going to hook you up with an Outlaw Radio
shirt. We want to know now. Post it. We want to know.
Please don't post it to the comment section. That's such a mistake.
Everyone will know.
Everyone will send him a shirt. That would not be a mistake. What do you mean?
Oh my gosh, crowdfunding shirts now. You just post your address
I need some
to random
t-shirts.
comment section.
Send me. That could be a fun thing to do. We have to, again, this is not probably the best place to brainstorm, but we could start a whole thing where send us a t-shirt for Creighton to wear on the Outlaw Radio Show.
Yes. Cash out money sign Derek R. Kennedy.
What was that guy? I'm trying to think back to the at a baseball World Series game where he held up his Venmo. It was a football game. He held up his Venmo.
Did he do that at one of the
I need money
Super
for beer,
Bowls?
and he got a ton of money.
Yeah, he made thousands and thousands of dollars.
Yes, that's the way to go.
I need to do that.
Yeah, Deal Daddy Derek, you need to come up with some ideas.
If you have a company that you want us to advertise, just Venmo me or Cash App me, and we'll make sure to bring it up in a conversation.
Hey, there's a lot of advertising space, right above your head.
Speaking of advertising, what's on your shirt?
Speaking of advertising, what heaven could be your shirt? Yeah. So I gotta sport this. So if you're looking, if you're wondering what this is, what's called the Upper Peninsula. It's technically part of Michigan. It's the part of Michigan that Canada rejected. So Canada didn't want it. And Michigan was like, I guess we'll get stuck with it.
Houghton.
And it's a little fly fish. So I've got a dear buddy, a brother. I'd consider him a brother. And it got some cool logos here. I don't know if I can get that. Dark Waters.
Yeah,
there you go.
There you go.
There you go. My bulging bicep there. Anyway, so my friend, my brother, Seth Waters. So kind of an interest, Dark Waters, fly shipping. So he runs. So he's a pastor of the Calvary Chapel Church in Iron River, Michigan, which is very cool.
Coolest name, Calvary Chapel, Iron River.
Yeah.
Coolest Calvary Chapel name.
Yes, we can't be included because we're just Calvary 316. It's not Calvary Chapel
obviously.
316. But yeah, Calvary Chapel, Iron River for sure.
Iron River.
Although if we were Calvary Chapel, Bold Springs, that would be a good one.
Bold name.
That's a bold. I see what you did there. So anyway, he pastors this really thriving, growing, very cool church there in Iron River, and moved there, not to pastor a church, but moved there, start a recording studio, bought a cool space in downtown Iron River, started a recording studio. And one thing led to another. They plugged into the Calvary Chapel there, and he finds himself pastoring the church. And just a Wisconsin boy fell in love with the nature up there and started fly fishing himself, found a bunch of cool spots, ended up taking tourists that would come up fly fishing. He's got like canoes and stuff buried like miles back into the brush and does like 3 or 4 day fly fishing expeditions. And so ended up actually getting rid of the recording studio because he needed more space, and has a full fly and tackle shop right there in downtown Iron River. And they've got a coffee shop connected to it, and just an entrepreneur, great Bible teacher, led worship at Calvary 316. I think it was maybe 2019 he came in town. It wouldn't have been pandemic, so it was the year before. Anyway, he actually he got offered some free radio space a few years back, and I ended up doing the voice over for his intro. So
really,
yeah,
I didn't know that.
yeah. So I mostly know not for Outlaw Radio, but for Seth's wildly successful 4-episode radio program
On the Upper Peninsula.
on the Upper Peninsula. Like, I'm a legend up there. Really, if when I get up there and I just start talking, people are gonna be like, "Oh my goodness, your voice resonates." Anyway, I rock this on Sunday, and it's starting to get warm in Georgia, so I'm afraid that I might not have too many more opportunities. It's very light. You can find his website, darkwater.com. Just
Man, you are a great advertiser. No one will ever accuse you of being
just
a
roll the
shill.
sleeve down.
I don't know if
Read
there's a .com on it. Is there a Nope, there's not a .com on it. There isn't.
Just Google it. You'll find it.
Yeah, you'll find it. When you're going to go to the Upper Peninsula, go fly fishing.
Yeah.
The next time you're up there, find Seth. But he sends me these videos of him going ice fishing.
That's crazy.
And it's like, what are you doing? Like, he has this video where they're in a sauna, him and some friends, and he's got a GoPro, and they run out of the sauna in their bathing suits through snow where they have cut out a hole in a lake, and they dive in, and then they get back out and run back to the sauna. And it's like, I'd have a heart attack. Like, I would literally die. But apparently it's something where like you purge your toxins. I don't know. I like my toxins. I want to keep them in me.
I've done a much lesser extent of that.
Yeah.
I had a friend who had a hot tub when we were like 11, and in December you get in the hot tub, you hang out for a while, and then you sprint to the pool, and then you sprint back to the hot tub.
Yep.
I have absolutely done.
You feel
that.
so fresh after that.
Oh yeah,
too.
but the pool wasn't frozen over where you had
That
to
is
cut
true.
a hole in
Yeah.
it.
But I mean, it was still cold.
Yeah, when you did
still cold.
Yeah, when you did it in Georgia, it was a balmy 52. We're not talking about like 7 degrees. Anyway,
No, that's crazy.
I have a theory that if the Nina, the Pinta, and the Santa Maria had navigation, no one would be living above the Mason-Dixon line. Like, we would have all settled in this, like where it's warm.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely true.
Crazy. Anyway,
We have a show to put on.
We
at
do.
some
Yeah,
point.
dude.
We do. And so now that everybody has tuned us out, let's continue. Let's continue. Next
We're
block,
having a
12
good
minutes.
time.
You guys ready?
Yep.
3, 2, 1. Welcome back to the Outlaw Radio Show. Today, again, joined by Creighton, we want to talk about prisons and policing. Creighton, is this relevant today for any in particular reason?
There have been, between the riots and the police killings and the triple guilty verdict that I'm still not sure how that works. Yeah, a lot of things are going on in terms of policing and the public.
So again, if you're listening on the radio or our podcast, you're in kind of a few week delay. So our live stream, which you can find outlawradio.live, YouTube, facebook.com/the radio outlaw. We live stream the recording of what you're listening to every Wednesday night at 8 p.m. Where we sit right now, yesterday, the verdict was handed down in this case in Minneapolis, the Derek Chauvin, who was a police officer that was videotaped, with his knee on the neck of George Floyd. And so at the end of May of 2020, this became a national news story. The video hit the media of Chauvin, this white police officer, with his knee on the neck, perceived neck, of George Floyd, a black man. And in the course of his arrest, and more than likely over the course of the 9 minutes or so that police officer Chauvin had his knee on the neck of the individual of Mr. Floyd, he died. And this became national news. It became a major media narrative. It really saw the reemergence, the very quick reemergence of the Black Lives Matter movement, which had really come to a forefront back in the riots that had taken place years before in St. Louis over another police killing, and they kind of became a national movement, but had really, you had not heard from them much until George Floyd, and you had this summer of what began as people hitting the streets in peaceful protest, although they quickly descended into riots, looting,
cities literally burning.
And I will say, just to try to be fair, I have a lot of problems with the Black Lives movement, the organization. I think they're a bit disingenuous in what their intentions are, what their purpose is. I think they are Marxist political organizations that are not looking for the protections of black people, but are looking to increase their own power and influence and reimagine the nuclear family, as an example. They want massive societal systematic changes. Again, if they were genuine about Black Lives Mattering and its truest sense of the branding, then they would not only be outraged about things that happened with George Floyd, but then they would also be equally outraged that we have an organization funded by basically the Democratic Party called Planned Parenthood that has killed more black people in any given year than any other institution ever devised by mankind. Again, speaking of the targeted abortion clinics in minority communities, Margaret Sanger, their founder, a pioneer of eugenics, literally wanting to decrease the population of the weaker races. Again, she was a full-blown racist. And there's a reason that Planned Parenthood facilitates the abortion of more, like we have generations of black kids that never made it out of the womb, generations of black scholars, black fathers, generation after generation, just never allowed to take their first breath. And so at Black Lives Matter, I'd have a lot more respect for if they carried their branding across the board, if they also spoke about just the incredible increase on black violence that we've seen in major American cities. Again, if you claim to be your movement Black Lives Mattering, then you would think you would be consistent across the board in advocating for the preservation of black lives. But needless to say, with George Floyd, there was a national outcry, regardless of politics, regardless of political persuasion. It was hard to watch that video, and we spoke about it at the time.
Yeah, I mean, the video looks really bad.
You know, what we discovered, and I'm going to say I actually watched all of this trial.
Me neither. And
the reason I did it was because I have a life. Like I don't know anybody that was able to watch, all of the minutia of the trial, but following it kind of from afar, there's no doubt that George Floyd, he had 3 times the fatal level of fentanyl in his system, had methamphetamine. You rewatch the video, he was clearly in distress. He was complaining about not being able to breathe before he was ever put on the ground. He was resisting arrest, which again makes sense if he's ODing. He's frantic. I listened to one guy that made the comment that proper policing technique would have acknowledged what was happening to the individual. This guy's clear, something's wrong. He's clearly under distress. And once you've subdued him, aka you've put handcuffs on him, sit him on the curb. Again, he's not being allowed to be put into the police car. But at that point, as soon as you recognize, again, foam in his mouth, that he's experiencing an overdose. Putting him on the ground, putting your foot on the back of his neck to try to is just dumb. You should have sat him on the curb and called 911. Like, you should have called an ambulance. Like, at that point, there's the medical emergency supersedes the fact that he that he floated a $20 fake counterfeit.
Right.
And
poor
the fact
decisions were made.
Poor decisions were made. And I think it's a shame that the trial was politicized as much as it was. Was that police? Did he deserve to be fired? Absolutely. Do our police need better training? Undoubtedly. There are so many things that went wrong. Why his buddy, who was clearly his drug dealer, wasn't arrested as well is beyond me. It was a terrible situation, and there was an immediate public outcry that was warranted. It quickly got hijacked, I think, by other forces. We finally get to this point where again, and I'm one of those that would advocate due process. Like, yes, there's flaws in the system, but our system would not exist without due process. The presumption of innocence. I think it was nuts that the jury wasn't sequestered. So the O.J. Simpson trial, the jury was sequestered so that there was no television. They didn't have access to newspapers.
I'm sorry, the jury wasn't sequestered?
The jury was not sequestered, which means every day they went home, which means that they had the ability, while they were told not to watch any media, they were exposed to conversations with their loved ones, their spouses.
This is the most publicized, I guess it's not totally important right now, but
well, and that creates a problem, because the idea of jury tampering and witness intimidation was very real in this situation. One of the witnesses called for the defense. A house was targeted where a severed pig's head was thrown onto his porch and blood was splattered. Ironically, they got the wrong guy, the wrong porch. Guy had nothing to do with it, but they were trying to target one of the witnesses with a severed pig's head, which is like straight out mafioso tampering. And it's like we have a system of rules, a system of laws. Everyone agreed, again, I don't know how first degree murder would be, or even second degree murder would be a stretch. But there should be some consequences to it. I think everyone was on board for that, but you got to let the process happen. And then you had Maxine Waters, the day before, coming out and inciting violence and saying, we want him convicted for first degree. Moron, he's not even being charged with first degree. And yet you're out there advocating he being convicted for something he's not even being charged with. Like, just insanity, to the point that in the final deliberations, the judge called out Maxine Waters and made the comment to the defense that, like, yeah, you're going to have grounds for an appeal to get this whole thing thrown out, because the jury was potentially exposed to a very powerful person in the House of Representatives calling out threats of violence if the verdict doesn't turn out the right way. And Biden voiced in inappropriately, the president of the United States, which has never happened. Again, the whole thing was a mess. I do think they got the verdict right. It was a unanimous verdict. I am a due process guy. We have a system, a jury of my peers, your peers, our peers, who actually sat through all the evidence, reached a guilty verdict. Now, we'll see what happens moving forward. But this introduces a much larger idea. Again, this verdict happened yesterday. Did you hear what happened today?
No.
So you didn't hear what happened today. So today in Ohio, and I'm not going to even try to get the names right, but in Ohio, a policeman was called to this disturbance. And you had, again, everyone involved is African-American. The police officer is white. Again, we're set up for a disaster. And the police officer, in the midst of this chaos, there's video of this 16-year-old attacking another 16-year-old, pulling out a knife and going after her, and the police officer shoots her to save the life of this other black 16-year-old.
Right, that seems like the thing you would do.
And LeBron James doxed the police officer and said, quote, "You're next."
LeBron James doxed him?
Posted a picture of the police officer before his name has been released. He subsequently pulled, like, he's deleted his tweet. But like wait a second. Black Lives Matter, and you have a police officer shooting someone in the act of trying to murder another person. Like, what is he supposed to do? Like, we are in this situation where why would you want to be a police officer? Like what do you like? There are like these people don't get paid much. They don't have all the adequate training, which should be discussed. They should be paid a lot more and be trained more. But we got these calls to defund the police. We need to abolish prisons. And that's what I want to talk about today. And I know this is a lengthy intro. We've taken half this show to talk about the intro. But it's relevant. It's on everyone's heart. It's on everyone's mind. You know what I'm saying? So we're going to get into this.
Like I said, it's going to get weird.
We want to hear from you, the listening audience. If there's anything said on the show that you disagree with, let us know. We'd love to hear from you. The easiest way to contact us, get our contact info, is to go to outlawradio.org. Again, go to outlawradio.org. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.
Wait, so LeBron James,
yeah, it happened,
multi-billionaire.
It happened like an hour before we got on air.
Oh my gosh!
Why? Why does he just take the basketball? Like play basketball. Like you're not a politician.
What was the last shut up and dribble? I think somebody got in trouble for saying that.
Newscaster said that.
Wait, isn't doxing illegal? Aren't there legal ramifications under one of those internet acts about doxing someone?
I don't know.
Like
you can research that in the next block and try to find some information. But again, we have no information.
Oh, and they're already calling for heads
on anything. But it kind of lets you know that, like, okay, dang it, we kind of got what we wanted with the Chauvin trial. He was found guilty. Well, that kind of takes the thunder out of the wind out of our sails.
What do you do now?
Like okay. So immediately the day after, it's like, well, let's find, like, you can find one of these. You know how many like officer involved shootings, like white officers that have killed black people in shootings? It's like 18 people a year or so.
I think the number is lower than that. And I also think that it's not just white on black. It's just all police officers. Like in 2019,
I think more black cops shot black people than white people.
Wouldn't surprise me.
There's a study done on that. I'm pulling that out of memory. I can find that and post that
That's
later.
insane. This girl was literally
You can watch the video. I watched
someone.
the video.
Oh my gosh.
And like, it's an out of control situation, and you can see the butcher knife in her hand. She's rearing back to go at this girl in pink up against the car, and the cop, who's yelling the whole time, fires around. I watched even some of the police chief, they did a press conference, and he was asked, well, why didn't the officer just shoot her in the leg?
I hate it so much when people say that.
Which is what Biden has. Well, I mean, they say that because the president, the dementia in chief, has said the same thing. Like, he's gone out there. I just came up with. He's said the same thing. So they're just echoing what the president of our country has said. We need, in a lethal situation, you shoot somebody in the leg. Guess what they can do?
Still move their arms.
Stab the person.
Yeah.
Stab with arms.
Also, legs are very small and move.
Yeah, I was gonna say that's so much harder to hit, especially if she's running. Well, you said she's got her pinned up against the car.
I will say,
so much harder to hit.
I will say, why we don't have the technology in place where you can shoot something other than a bullet that kills someone. Because, dude, you got a shotgun with a bing bag round in it.
Oh yeah, I've seen.
You hit somebody with that. I mean, they're not stabbing anybody. I mean, they're down.
They're going down for a hot minute.
They're going down, and it's a non-lethal way of imposing into a situation. I think some of that stuff should absolutely be implemented and discussed. Like, we've got technology, creating a gun with basically a beanbag round, I mean,
that's the ultimate point of tasers.
I mean, that's
the only problem with tasers is that tasers sometimes, like, there are hundreds of videos online of someone taking a taser to the chest and just ripping out the hooks and continuing
on. Especially if you're hyped up on LSD or PCP or meth. Like, if you've got drugs in your system, it's hard to incapacitate. Like, whatever. Like, even the natives, the African natives knew how to do this. Like, why don't we have blow darts? like
out cold
down
with poison dark fraud neurotoxin.
Like it'll wear off in 10 days, but we're gonna do
in coma for 10 days.
We're gonna do enough of it that, like, it hits you and you're like doom, as opposed to like killing someone. Like again,
Or a giant net.
Shit.
Just a big
like
net.
again,
I have seen some really cool anti-personal thing where it's like gun and it shoots what is essentially a bolo. So it's like a steel cable this wide, and you shoot it at somebody and it has weights on either side. So when it hits them, it wraps them up and they just can't move.
yeah,
Like
man,
it either wraps up their arms or wraps up their legs or both if you're a good shot.
again. Yeah, it's just who wants to be a cop, man? Seriously.
Absolutely not.
Seriously. All right, we've got second half of the show. Let's get into this. 11 minutes. You guys got anything? You two knuckleheads?
No, that was it.
We're good. All right, let's do this. 11 minutes, Craig. 3,
Got
2, 1. Welcome back to the Outlaw Radio Show. There is no question that over the last year or so, with the tragic death, and I say that honestly, the tragic death. Every death is tragic. The death of George Floyd. Yes, there was some resolve to the situation. A guilty verdict. I think it was, Creighton, and you can correct me, it was third-degree murder, I think is what he was convicted for.
He was convicted of second-degree murder, third-degree murder, and manslaughter. He got 3 convictions.
Which
I don't know how that works.
Yeah, I don't exactly know how that works, but again, I if a jury of my peers reached the conclusion that he was innocent, then
I mean, that is
he would have been
due
innocent,
process.
but he's guilty, so he's guilty, and I'm fine with that. And the appeals process can happen. I mean, OJ was innocent. Let's be real. OJ didn't do it. If the glove don't fit, you must
acquit. He was guilty.
Must acquit. So my point, though, is that there are examples of the system working. There are examples of the system not working. Again, we live in a fallen world, a fallen planet. Our government's led by sinners, even the judiciary. You have 12 people on a jury of fallen people. Like they're impressionable. They're sinners. Like there is not a perfect system in a fallen world, which is kind of the interesting thing about God and what he does with the children of Israel leaving Egypt. So if you're listening and you're not familiar with kind of the overarching story, God told Abraham he'd grow his family into a mighty nation. That would include a stopover in Egypt. And so we see how that played itself out with Joseph, one of Jacob, who is also known as Israel, one of his sons, Joseph, being sold into slavery, finding his way into Egypt, rising to power, the whole family moving there. And they stay there for like 400 years. And from there, they start as a family of like 70, 72 people. And by the time you get to the book of Exodus, this is no longer a small family living in a foreign area. It's been 350 years, 400 years. They are an incredible mass of people living on foreign soil. They are an ethnic force to be reckoned with within Egypt. And if you read, again, the first few chapters of Egypt, concerned about the dynamic at play, they treated the Hebrews poorly. They placed them into bondage. They enslaved them. They treated them badly, even to the point that when that didn't work, they engaged in a measure of eugenics. They started killing off generations of small male children, hoping to curtail a growing population. Again, that's where Moses kind of gets introduced to this whole story. Well, over time, God uses Moses to be a vessel. This ends up being 80 years later. Calls Moses, raises Moses up to be the vessel in which God is going to free his people, the children of Israel, this nation, out of Egyptian bondage, leading them back to the land of promise, the land that God had promised Abraham. And spoiler alert, Moses says, let my people go. There's some plagues. God breaks the will of Pharaoh. They get released. He reneges on his deal. The armies come out and they get drowned in the Red Sea while the children of Israel pass safely. They ultimately, long story, get to their promised land. And it's here that God's taking this group of basically slaves, and he's forming, institutionalizing a nation. God doesn't leave this to human ingenuity. He doesn't leave this to democracy or the will of the people. He doesn't place this into a vote. In fact, God descends onto Mount Sinai, the presence of God onto the mountain. Moses is called up, and God specifically codifies the law. God determines how this group of people, how their nation, their government, their society was going to function. God would be in their center, and every part of their culture, of the way their society worked, was articulated by God. And a lot of it is communicated. Again, you can go to the book of Leviticus to see a lot of this, but you have these various offerings, these various laws that get put into place. What's really interesting, though, when you study Egyptian culture and how God is intentionally establishing the children of Israel to be different from Egypt, to operate in contrast. Like God structures the society of Israel to be completely foreign to the way that the world operated. And he does that because everything is a picture of heaven. Everything articulates ideas and principles. God calls the children of Israel out of the world to be his people. He forms their society to be radically different than the way everything else works, in order to articulate to the rest of the fallen world that there is a higher ideal than what they're doing. I mean, every part of their society was different, and sometimes even strangely so. You know, the very first mention, Creighton, of prison, the idea of a prison in the Bible. Do you know where it's first introduced?
I'm going to guess somewhere in the New Testament with Paul.
No, in the Bible. There's a lot of Bible before you get to Paul.
Yeah, I know. I was taking a nice, let's go bold.
Okay, let's go back to the story of Joseph. What kind of happens to Joseph a lot?
Oh, that's right. Joseph does get thrown into prison, doesn't he?
That is the first, like when Joseph gets falsely accused of impropriety with Potiphar's wife, he gets placed into prison. He's imprisoned. Along with him, you also have the butler and the baker. They're also imprisoned, until they could ascertain who was trying to whack the Pharaoh. But that is the very first mention in the Bible of prison. There's no mention of it beforehand. There's no mention of it through the life of Jacob or Isaac, Abraham, or you go back to the days of Noah or the pre-flood world. Like there's no mention of the idea of a prison, of incarceration, is first introduced in Egypt, according to the scriptures, in the context of, Joseph, which is very interesting because, again, God is instituting a society in Israel that is intentionally to contrast that of Egypt, which represents the world. And what's fascinating, again, what doesn't exist in Israel that existed in Egypt? Prison. There is not any mention of the idea of prison in
the law.
In the law and God's plan and God's model. So in place of that, in place of prison, and maybe I should define prison. Prison is basically the idea of the exchanging of time served for a crime. So you commit a crime. Let's say your crime is burglary. And what do? Well, we equate a measure of time we're going to take from your life as recompense for the crime. So you have to serve 10 years. And if you've been a good model prisoner, maybe we cut time off of your sentence. So you get out in 8 for good behavior. You murder someone, you're given a life sentence. Some get 20 years and the possibility of parole at that point. Some are given a life sentence without parole. If you get pulled over for a DUI, you go to jail. Same idea of an incarceration. So that very notion that time can be an appropriate recompense for a crime is not a biblical concept whatsoever. In fact, the Bible presents kind of an entirely opposite idea that I think is way more equitable and fair. Like, yes, we've had this theme over the last few weeks where we're talking about areas in which conservatives, Christian evangelicals can meet Democrats in the middle. I'm not sure we can meet in the middle with policing, which I'll get to. But I think we can get into the middle ground. Like, I am going to call for the abolition of prison. We should get rid of prisons entirely.
Prison reform is something everyone can get behind.
And not just prison reform. We should get rid of prisons altogether. Now, what I'm going to propose probably is not going to float, but we should get rid of prison. In the Old Testament, again, Leviticus, there was what was known as the trespass offering. So the entire way that the society, the judicial process within Israel was structured by God to operate is that if you committed a crime, it was required of you to make recompense to the victim. Again, one of the things lost in our judicial system is that we don't care about the victim at all. Like, we just take time from you, but we don't make the victim whole ever. Like, that's not the way that the system works. If you steal from someone, we give you time. We don't make you like restore what was stolen from the person you hurt. We kind of let the victim like, well, stinks to be you, bud. It's what's kind of wrong in it. The Bible flips that. There's the trespass offering. If you commit a crime, it becomes incumbent on you to make good on the crime. Like, you have to restore to the victim what you took from him. And I'm going to give you a few examples of this. Now, obviously, where I'm not sure I can get behind is, okay, let's decide that we're not going to use the word police. We should reimagine policing. You know what we should call it? Law enforcement. Because if you don't have any people that are there enforcing whatever the laws you have in a country, then you don't have any laws. You know what I mean?
Yes,
So
absolutely.
forget it. Well, let's get rid of the police and have law enforcement. Don't go anywhere. We'll conclude these thoughts with the Outlaw Radio Show.
Oh, man, we're going to get canceled. Oh, I know where this is going, and I know it's
canceled yet. So
Let's just get into this. You guys ready? Y'all
I already
rolling
know
with
what's
me?
coming. So.
I'm
something
so
bad to
excited.
say.
I'm down.
You got something bad to say?
Yeah, but I'll have to say it off air.
Oh. All right, 9:45. 9:45. I'm on a roll. Let's do this.
Go for it. Did your iPad just die?
No, I'm looking at a few notes.
Oh,
3, 2, 1. Welcome back to the Outlaw Radio Show. I want to read again just a quick section. Creighton, you were there. I taught through the book of Leviticus. Again, you know, we're such a cool church that we not only teach through books of the Bible, but we teach through books of the Bible that no one know are in the Bible.
yeah. I said we should do Deuteronomy next, and you said no.
I said, no, let's do Song of Solomon, you know,
That's right.
which is also really high on the obscure list. But hey, it was like the gospel according to Leviticus. There's so much gospel. Leviticus is one of the coolest books of the Bible, but I want to just read kind of a section that I covered on the trespass offering as it relates to when I'm discussing about abolishing prisons. At the heart of the trespass offering was the idea that restitution was the best way to provide justice for the victim, effectively rehabilitate the lawbreaker, and in the end, deter continued criminality. As we've already read, if you did something that wronged your neighbor, the law required the guilty party take personal ownership of their crime and immediately engage in the necessary steps to make it right, restore in full with an added 20%. The idea of serving time in jail as an equitable consequence was totally rejected. Not only does this concept explain why certain crimes resulted in death, as there was no way the culprit could make restitution, or why a failure to obey these laws resulted in the guilty party being kicked out of society, but even the Levitical allowance of slavery embodied something completely different. As we'll see, and again, we discussed this, generational servitude or the enslaving of ethnic minorities was forbidden. Instead, slavery was the means by which a person with no money could make restitution for a crime through his labor. Once the debt was paid, he was freed. While there are those who see Leviticus as antiquated and regressive, in America, there is no question our penal system is terribly broken and justice far from fair or equitable. According to the Prison Policy Institute, in 2016, 2.3 million people were incarcerated. One of the biggest indicators the system doesn't work is that within 5 years of being released from prison, the recidivism rate is 76.6%. Our approach fails to deter criminal behavior. I wonder what our society would look like if instead of using time served as a mode of punishment, we had a system where a criminal had to make restitution. Needless to say, our society would save a ton of money, and the recidivism rates would likely plummet. So the whole idea in the Levitical law is that if you committed a crime, you had to do something tangible to pay back the crime. Again, the easiest application, if you stole something from your neighbor and you were caught, it was then enforced that you had to not only restore what you stole, but you had to add 20% for, well, inconvenience. It was an inconvenience fee.
Pain and suffering.
Pain and suffering, right. So that was the process. Now, if you stole something and spent it, squandered it, or let's say you stole some cattle and ran it off a cliff, so you couldn't pay back what was owed, well, then you were then required to serve, like to work off your debt to the individual. So it was like, give me jobs around the house. And again, there was a system, while not necessarily articulated in the law, there were components of law enforcement. There were people that enforce the laws. Again, if you don't have the enforcement of law, you have no law, which again, people in our society that are calling for the abolition of the police fail to present like, what do you replace them with? Again, we can talk about, creating means of non-lethal, we talked about this off air of like, it's a shame that the only tool is a taser or a gun that shoots a bullet that can kill someone. Like if they had a shotgun with beanbags, that guy's going down. Like, yes, there's some conversation, increased pay. So we attract maybe more qualified individuals, more money for training and whatnot. In the end, by the way, they don't care about replacing the police. The idea is destroying the police, the institution, and replacing it with something else. That's the left's goal. This has nothing to do with Black lives. It's the mechanism of getting rid of the one institution in America that happens to be conservative, which are the police. You go back to any totalitarian regimes, actual fascism, you know what they always were able to do?
Destroy and replace law enforcement.
Destroy and replace law enforcement. You have the brown shirts of the Nazis. That's how you're able to practically enforce your will on the people. And because the police happen to be more conservative leaning, the whole goal here is to destroy the police so that it can be replaced with something that the left can control. My point is that the only way, like we should imagine restitution, create a system of restitution. You get a speeding ticket, you pay a fine. I think that's adequate. It's a victimless crime. If you get a speeding ticket, you can't pay. Well, then there's community service that has to be done. If it's a victimless crime, then it's community service. Like, hey, I don't know if you've noticed, like there's a lot of trash on the side of the roads that people can be picking up. There's a lot of walls in the cities that can be painted. There's a lot of work. Shoot, with the DOT, like you can pay it off. You stand there and flip a sign that says slow to stop. Like,
as someone who has been on the wrong side of the law and done community service, I actually think that's a wonderful idea. Now, I picked up skills, and I felt good about the time that I spent.
And again, there are, and I think that there should where this breaks down, and where I'm going to get upset people, is that again this complete concept instituted by God. There was specific designations where recompense could not be given because of the crime itself was so heinous. For example, murder, like premeditated murder, resulted in, like, how do you restore the life? Like, you can't, which means that your life is required, and they take you and they stone you to death. If you rape someone, or you do something vicious in that sense, again, there's nothing you can do to make that right. Like, you can't restore the victim. And so as the deterrent for further crime, that person's taken out in stoning. I am a big proponent, and this is what I'm proposing, that we abolish the jail system, we institute a restitution policy, and we expand what we execute people for.
Absolutely on board. Rape should be a capital crime.
More capital crime. And again, there should be a process of innocent until proven guilty. I think that those things should be in place.
An appellate court.
A court system of some type. I think our founding fathers, did, again, this is a good job of instituting something in a broken, fallen culture that is as close, like it's still broken. It's never going to be perfect. None of this will ever be perfect until the judge is perfect, his name being Jesus. And when he's the judge and the jury, every pronouncement will be correct. Some things are going to happen. That's okay. But again, abolishing the police, okay, well, let's call them law enforcement, or you don't have laws. And let's get rid of the prison system and institute a work program. The trespass offering is what we'll call it. Because again, that was God's ideal. When God was forming a society so that it was in contrast to the rest of the world, specifically Egypt, he was like, yeah, no prisons. Egypt did that. Joseph was in prison and he was an innocent man, right?
Right.
The butler was an innocent man and was in prison. The baker, a guilty man, and they executed him. He got his just due. But God's like, no. I've got a better idea. And so we have this entirely different framework. And so, again, where the right and the left, Christians can get behind. If Joe Biden came out tomorrow and said, let's get rid of the prison system, expand the death penalty, and institute the trespass offering, amen and amen and amen. Let me help. So you got anything you want to add before we bounce?
Just that's never going to happen, but it's a wonderful dream.
It will happen. The millennial kingdom, I believe that's exactly the way that it will be structured.
Oh, that would make sense.
Again,
Cool.
it's God's ideal. And I think it's justice. It's like the idea of we're gonna take time, and that's somehow makes the victim whole. Like, what about the victim? And that's what I think we miss.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think we have a lot of holes, especially what we don't kill people for.
Thanks for being on the show, brother.
Always a pleasure.
Well, you've been listening to the Outlaw Radio Show. If you like what you heard, contact your local Christian radio station and thank them that they're carrying this type of programming in your area. If you're listening on the radio, check out our podcast, Apple, Google, Spotify. You can also check out outlawradio.live. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. You can watch the live stream recording of what you're listening to. All of our contact information, and again, we'd love to hear from you, the listening audience. You can find it at outlawradio.org. Again, outlawradio.org. Once again, my name is Zach Adams. I hope you join me this time next week for more of the Outlaw Radio Show. Well, there you have it.
Yeah, I'm currently looking up what is one of the worst people who ever lived and what he got charged with. Yeah. Okay. I was pretty sure that was true, but I wasn't certain. Do you know who Joseph D'Angelo is?
Is he the serial killer that's killed like 90 something people that they never caught? Like it was all random, and he's in Texas.
Yeah. He's he's known as the Golden State Killer.
He was a truck driver, wasn't he?
No, not that one. This is a different one, but same idea.
Okay.
This one is he was in the 70s. He started out just breaking into houses. Then he started raping women. He raped like 70 something women. Murdered 13 that he was convicted of. But due to the way that the statute of limitations worked, like he confessed to 50 something rapes, wasn't able to be charged for any of them.
Well, and really ran out of time to get into this, but and I'll throw this to you guys, kind of a thought. Again, I think that there's so much that's wrong with our system because it doesn't prioritize making the victim whole. That's left to civil stuff. I think the whole system would be more, there would be more justice to it if the goal was first to restore the victim, to make sure the victim was whole. And if you can't do that, then that should let you know what happens afterwards. Secondarily is then the rehabilitation of the criminal. We have a system that seeks to rehabilitate the criminal. The whole idea is we're gonna charge you and convict you, and we're gonna give you a punishment. There'll be a punishment because we're hoping that in the process of it, you will see the error of your ways, you'll get rehabilitated, and then can come back into society. The problem is again, the recidivism rate's like 76.6%. Like our system does not do that. We do not rehabilitate criminals. Like taking time away from them as punishment doesn't change anything.
It actually does a lot worse sometimes because you're
Sometimes,
sticking
yeah.
people who are in a bad situation in a worse situation, surrounded by people who are mired in terrible things.
Right.
So it actually goes the opposite direction, probably as much, if not more, than it does actually help to.
And so the whole idea of like, of working to make good on your crime to the victim, it was that process that God designed. It has the best way of changing the person's perspective, because you realize at that point, like, the real world consequence that you caused someone else. And it's in the process of now making good on that, that something happens to the individual that committed the crime. Again, as a parent, you employ these type of techniques with siblings. When one sibling does something to the other, it's not just, I say I'm sorry, but it's not like, do something to make good on it. Like, and it's in that process. It's not just time served. It's making good on it. It's not one thing to say, I'm sorry. It's to say, how can I make this better? Like, how can I make you whole? I did something. I hurt you. I want to make that right. In doing that, that's how you rehabilitate someone. I think that there are so many crimes, though, that we don't enact the correct punishment because we have this secular false belief of that some people can be rehabilitated. Like, again, the Bible presents certain crimes as being so egregious that there is no rehabilitation from it. That something within the psyche of the human being committing the crime is so broken that it can't be fixed, and as a result, you need to take them out and stone them. They're not fixable, and as a result, they're a detriment and a danger to society at large. People that are into pedophilia, people that are into perverse sexual things like rape or incest or bestiality, like perversion, the Bible says that's not, like, there's something broken. And we've seen that psychologically, like with serial killers. There's a part of their brain that once they get killing, it turns off and is gone.
Yeah.
Like, you can't fix that. Dexter could not be fixed, He was broken, which is why his stepfather trained him to just kill guilty people, the people who deserved it, because he knew his son was going to kill. So just take it out on these people, which is kind of this twisted superhero. That was a show on Showtime, by the way. But what do you guys, what are your thoughts on just the whole topic? Nick, Derek?
Yeah, back to the Minneapolis protests and the trial and everything. We watched a snippet of it yesterday, and my thoughts were, it was like after the conviction and everything. And I was like, well, what would have happened if they didn't get what they want? And was there any pressing? Well, like you said, I didn't know that about the jury. They were non-sequestered and allowed
Crazy.
to go home. But the influence that would have had on the decision, I don't know. I don't care what he had in his system or what didn't happen. But if to go through the due process to find out what actually happened, if there was more of a pressing, like, okay, you know what, we actually have to give the people what they want, because if we don't, they're going to burn Minneapolis down.
If you were on that jury, a serious question. Like, they got this set up. They're supposed to be anonymous.
Yeah, yeah, right.
So are the people donating to Kyle Rittenhouse. That have now, that got hacked and it's been released. And you've got a police officer gave a $25 donation, just got fired today, that's insanity. An EMT guy gave $10 and had reporters show up at his house. Like we're in a weird place with that stuff happening. That you can't donate to a cause.
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
If you were on that jury, though, like, I saw a news guy today, Greg Gutfeld on Fox, maybe it was last night. He made the comment like I'm glad they found him guilty, even if he was innocent. And what he was saying was like,
Chauvin's life isn't worth
like what was going to happen. And it's not even in Minneapolis.
Yeah.
I mean, you saw what happened
all
over.
over.
They say
want blood. They
$1
want blood.
to $2 billion in property damage happened last summer because of these riots.
Yeah.
Oh, I mean, sorry, peaceful protests.
Yeah.
And upwards of $2 billion, 1 to 2 numbers I've seen, and innocent people. I mean, people, interestingly, minorities largely.
Well, yeah, you're right in your own house. Why not?
Yeah. Let's just, I'm used to getting my my groceries at the Piggly Wiggly, which is the closest thing to me. So let's burn that down so I can't get food without driving 30 miles away. Smart, but again, go ride on Rodeo Drive. Like, I don't know. Anyway, but like if you were on that jury and you were worried that you could get doxxed, like if you were the one guy that was like, I think he's innocent. If you were that one guy, which by the way, you have every right to make your own determination, your own conclusion. I mean, you really going to be that guy?
Yeah, then everybody's against you.
And then they're going to show up at your house?
Yeah. And your family, yeah.
Your family, your friends, your extended family, the church you go to. I mean,
some dude that sold you a hot dog 6 months ago.
Yeah. Before
there's no telling how wide they're going to go with this.
Yeah. Before the conviction was even there, like you said, with the pig's head, they're already trying to intimidate people.
I would have listened.
You better make the decision that we want. That's what it was saying.
I'll throw this out. I don't know this for sure, but I'll just throw out a theory. I think the jury were like, I think they're overcharging. I think he's guilty of something. I'm not sure he's guilty of particularly second degree or whatnot, but we have no choice but to find him guilty because that gets us out and the whole thing will get thrown out on appeal.
I was going to say is the next step appeal. And then what happens after that?
The whole case can be thrown out on appeal.
Yeah. If it gets thrown out on appeal, Chauvin's good because double jeopardy can't be tried again.
Yeah. So what happens after that? More riots?
They try for first degree murder.
Well, no, man. Listen. You know what will happen?
Oh yeah, for the same thing.
You know what will happen? There'll be nothing. You'll never hear about this again. And then at some point, a year from now, you'll see
something else is going to happen.
You'll see this little headline that says Chauvin trial got overturned on appeal, and that'll be it. Like what they wanted out of it's already gotten. They'll go on to another case. I mean, go back to, and I was struggling to come up with Ferguson, the St. Louis. I said St. Louis. I was trying to figure out Ferguson. Michael Brown. I mean, the whole hands up, don't shoot was a complete myth.
Mm-hmm.
It's provable. A complete myth. They got what they wanted, and did that make news? Did that ever come back out? Ever discussed? Oh, yeah.
I mean, within hours of the decision being made, I was seeing stuff on Reddit and Facebook about how this isn't justice. It's not enough. Yeah. It'll be enough when I don't actually know where that ends, but it's crazy to me.
So the whole pretext of the January 6th, the whole media narrative of the riot, and which became the impeach Trump because of it. And what was the Swetnick? Was that his name?
That's a name that I've heard before.
Google the Capitol Police Officer Swetnick. I want to make sure I get his name right. Anyway, he got laid in state. Like he was laid in the Capitol. He died during the riot. And CNN, MSNBC, the whole story that was presented was that he had gotten
Brian Sicknick.
Brian Sicknick. So the whole media narrative was that Brian Sicknick had gotten hit in the head by Trump supporters in the Capitol riot with a fire extinguisher, and that's how he died. Well, that was the narrative. I mean, repeated wall to wall. It was included in the impeachment of Trump. The family, the mom of Officer Brian, was like, he called me that night and said he was fine. I don't know what they're talking about. It took 3 months for the autopsy. This media narrative was used. It was ran through. It gave the justification to go arrest conservatives. I mean, you got people still in jail for that, all that. Come to find out, he died of 2 strokes of natural causes. The only person that actually died in the Capitol riot
was that lady that got shot in the neck.
Was that lady that got shot by a Capitol police officer. Do you know the Capitol Police have an exemption of having to release the name of police officer involved shootings? They have an exemption. Capitol Hill police officers have an exemption that they don't have to release the name of the officer. Every other police station, police municipality in the nation has to, by law. The Capitol Hill police have an exemption to it. We still don't know who pulled the trigger, why he pulled the trigger. She was unarmed. It's just it doesn't fit the narrative. Like, again, I've said this for the last year. We have no news. We have nothing but narratives.
Yep.
That's the easiest way to understand. I don't care if it's Fox or not. Fox, MSNBC, CNN. You're not getting news. You're only getting narratives. Which, again, tying this back together, Derek Chauvin, if I was on that jury, I'd be like, yeah, man, I'm not risking my family, my kid's future. You know what? Yeah, guilty. Because there's enough already here that this is like, I'll let a judge actually institute some measure of justice.
Yeah.
Yeah, it makes sense. Kick the ball down the road and keep literal cities from burning.
Yep.
Sure.
Keep the pieces.
Or I would have done like, there's no way I would ever allow myself to be on that jury.
Yeah.
I would have watched.
yeah.
I would have showed up with like a nice little white hat on top,
Like the
iron cross on the breast.
like the Pope.
Yeah, like the.
Was that a
Even
Catholic?
that would work.
A white hat like the Pope.
Yeah, I would call myself Grand Dragon Peter the 15th.
That should be your new like handle for something.
New grinder handle.
Like nothing like. Whoa. Nothing like combining the KKK and Roman Catholicism. Only here on the Outlaw Radio Show. By the way, joke made by a black guy, the one black guy here.
Hi, I'm black. I get to make jokes about the KKK. It's the perk.
Right. Anyway, so you guys have anything else, or should we?
I've got one thing.
Okay.
I've thought about this a couple of times while talking about the whole defund the police thing. I think one of the big things between us and the left is that they believe that people are fundamentally good, which is why rehabilitation is such a big thing. It's why they want to rehabilitate the 15 they want to try and rehabilitate the dude who's been caught with 6 pounds of meth 15 times by the police. Like, no, this time
Go ahead, stone.
he's a
this
good
guy.
dude.
he's a
Right.
good deep down he's a good guy.
Yeah.
This time we
He
got
just
him.
had a really traumatic childhood.
Right. And it's like, no, he's just a dirtbag who likes to sell meth. We should exile him to, I don't know, where do we exile people here? The Galapagos?
Madagascar
Is that
or
close
something. I
enough?
don't know.
St. Simon's Island
Upper
becomes a
Peninsula.
penal
Saint
colony.
Simon.
Long Island.
I'm going to jail then if
Yeah, no, no.
they're exiling me to St. Simon's.
I think it was
I have to
Robin
stay here.
and one of Robin Williams' stand-ups. This was years ago. He had a bit, I'll butcher it, but to the effect of he was like, we should have, like, Nebraska's a pretty good square state, you know, and we should build a fence around it. And on one side, we should put all of the violent murderers. And on the other side, we should put all the violent sex criminals. And one day a year, we should just let them go at it and televise it.
Like the Hunger Games.
Yeah, like a mix of the Hunger Games and the Purge.
Yeah.
Yeah, except for the Hunger Games were like just kids that they were just trying to make it.
Yeah.
As opposed to like we're going to let one of you guys out on grace. Like
Has
there's
anybody
one.
There's a Stone Cold Steve Austin movie where it's basically that exact premise, but they drop them on an island. It's terrible. It's a terrible
Of
movie.
course,
I know
it
what you're
stars
talking about.
Stone
Yeah, it's
Cold
like a
Steve
redneck
Austin.
survival or
Yeah.
whatever. It's like
I'm gonna watch that.
what is it?
What is
Because
it
they would do the
called?
game shows.
Your mic's
like
not even
that.
in front of you when you're talking, Nick.
So they would do the game shows,
It's
but
not
there's
the
a new one out.
Expendables.
It's like an Alabama island survival show
Yes, it
featuring
is.
Steve
I
Stone
want to
Cold
watch
Austin.
that right
All right.
now.
Well, if we got into Stone Cold Steve Austin, it's time to pull the ripcord, I think.
Yeah, that's probably a good
on this
choice.
show. I just keep I can see myself and
There you go. Sorry,
then-
I got distracted.
I can
The
see myself in
Condemned.
the,
The name of the
monitors,
movie is
and
The
I've
Condemned.
got like this wicked
Oh yeah, you got some sunglass tan.
raccoon sunglass tan.
Yeah, you need to work on that.
No, I'm gonna work on making
That's what I'm
it
saying,
more
make it more.
pronounced.
Only wear
Anyway.
those.
All right,
Yeah,
you
we
guys,
should
y'all
give-
say
we should-
goodbye.
Bye.
Bye.
See you guys next Wednesday, 8 p.m. God bless.